we welcome you back in. Our National Signing Day 2019 show continues here from the Pushkar Center. Tony Caridi along with Jed Drenning, and we are now welcoming WVU head football coach Neal Brown. So I guess like after your first year of marriage and an anniversary, you get a paper gift.
That's right.
What is 1 month for a coach?
That's a good
Like,
question.
what do you get, like a new whistle?
How about some sleep? Yeah. That'd be good, a little rest. No, it's been a whirlwind, been hectic, but a lot of fun. You know, one of the things that I've probably enjoyed the most is just getting out of the state of West Virginia, meeting folks and being in those high schools and meeting the high school coaches. It has been a whirlwind, but I feel like we've gotten a lot accomplished in a short amount of time.
Neal, what's
going on, guys?
Oh, hey, look at this.
Doing a good job today, my man.
Let me tell you something.
There's the hardest working man in this university is right here.
Yeah, I agree. This guy right here is one of the all-time great Mountaineers. And I've been here for 30-plus years, and this guy here has been one of the best representatives and ambassadors for West Virginia I've
He's
ever
my
seen.
son Dax's favorite. He's my father-in-law's favorite. I mean, across the board, he's the man.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I tell you, Coach is killing it today. He's came guns blazing. He's done a great job. So it's a great day to be a Mountaineer.
There is, wherever you may be. Thanks, buddy.
Yes, sir.
Take care. So that was impromptu, very live. All right, so when you went out throughout the state and you've been meeting these folks, my perception is that your perception of what WVU football was and meant to the state, you probably now confirmed what your thought was, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the real intriguing aspects of this job was the fact that you're the state university, that you had the whole state behind you, 1.8 million. I've heard that a lot. You know, 1.8 million Mountaineers behind you, and you see, and you can feel the power of that when you get out in the state. You know, whether it's at a basketball game, whether it's in a high school, whether it's just out to eat, you know, in every corner of the state, you can feel the passion that people have for West Virginia athletics, and it's really special. And not just for myself, our staff. We were in a staff meeting earlier today, and that was something that we were talking about. A couple of guys said, hey, you know, we were down recruiting last week, and we had a group come up because they'd seen her face, and they wanted to know about recruiting and all that kind of stuff.
Coach, one of the things I think people are starting to appreciate is outside the lines what they're getting with Coach Neal Brown. And everybody is tremendously excited about that, the type of guy that you are. And when you look back to what the Troy fans had to say as you were leaving, that just speaks volumes to that. Now, inside the lines, I think it's going to take some time to sort itself out. People understand your air raid background. People understand the names you're attached to. But the more you study what you accomplished at Troy, the more impressive it is. And one of the reasons is, even coming from that pedigree, that aired out, high-octane background, you like to win ugly. You don't win 31 games without doing that. You won a game last year with 220 yards with your backup quarterback. You beat Nebraska with 253 yards. You held LSU off the field because you had to. Talk about that.
Well, I think it's a maturation process, really, as you go through your career, whether it's an offense coordinator or as a head coach, is you got to find ways to win. At the end of the day, that's what matters is you're here to win football games when you get to that Saturday afternoon or that Saturday evening. And, you know, last year we had to win ugly quite a bit. And the strengths of our team at the start of the year was we were really explosive offensively. And we were playing at a high level. And then we had a change at quarterback, and we had some bumps in the road. But as we went through the season, our strengths kind of changed, and we started playing defense at a high level, extremely high level. Probably, if you look at over the last 7 games of the season through the bowl game, is we played defensively as well statistically as anybody in the country. And then our special teams, we were the #1 team, and according to ESPN, in special teams efficiency. So we played to our strengths. We ran the ball. We hit explosive plays. We were able to overcome a lot of injuries, and it wasn't always pretty. But to go 10-3, I felt like in the 4 years we were at Troy, that was our best job with that football team.
Yeah, let's jump in here now and talk about some of the kids that are signing today. We talked about the 2 that are already in. Another one is coming this hour. A press conference will take place at his high school. Then we'll make the formal announcement on that. But one of the other names that you've heard of is Austin Kendall, the post-grad transfer from Oklahoma, who is now here and is enrolled. You've got competition coming up here in spring practice. You've got a 3-quarterback situation in your room. You knew Austin from your days at Kentucky, where you coached his brother. Walk us through the need and walk us through why you like him.
Well, I think the need was evident as we had 2 scholarship quarterbacks, and I like both of those guys, and Trey Lowe and in Jack Allison. I think both those are really good human beings. I think they got an opportunity to be great football or great quarterbacks here at West Virginia, but we only had 2, and Trey's participating in baseball this spring, so he may or may not be available at all times during the spring. So we felt like we needed to add a guy. We needed to add a guy that could immediately compete, so we needed to add a guy that had experience and long relationship with Austin and his family. We recruited Austin really heavily at the University of Kentucky, and then obviously followed his career, but had an opportunity to coach Ryan, his brother, knew his mom and dad as well.
2 parts of his game I'd like to ask you about. One, he's a lot more nimble than you might think.
Yeah.
He's a slightly athletic kid, athletic enough to get you out of trouble, that can help you with angles in the screen game. He can throw off different platforms. He can even make some things happen, moving the chains on 3rd down. Talk about that, but also talk about the fact when you watch some of that Oklahoma tape, despite hardly getting reps with the ones, he seemed to have a bit of a relationship with their starting receivers, with Hollywood Brown, with CeeDee Lamb. Can that translate here and maybe ratchet things up from a timeline standpoint with our starters?
Well, he has the ability to connect, and that's something that you look for at quarterback. You want somebody that's going to connect with the skill players in the offensive line. And I always thought it's the chameleon effect. You know, the really successful quarterbacks can, regardless of who it is or what surroundings they're in, they blend in with all those guys. And I think he has that aspect. He has a leadership. Components that you want out of your quarterback. As far as his physical skill set, he has an extremely quick release. He has a really strong arm. He can make all the throws with velocity. He has the ability to, I wouldn't necessarily call him a runner. We're not necessarily going to call run plays for him specifically, but he has the ability to extend plays and create. In today's college football game, you've got to be able to extend plays and create. If you look at the 2 guys that he played behind at Oklahoma the last 2 years, the last 2 Heisman Trophy winners, they had the ability to do that. I know he was well coached in high school. I know I have a lot of respect for Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. I know he's well coached during his time at Oklahoma, and he learned from Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield and watched them up close and personal. So he's a guy that we're excited. Now he's still got to come, and he's still got to win the football job, and he has not done that yet.
We are 6 weeks away from really the start of spring ball. Can you walk us through here, Neal, as to how you will begin to put this offense together? Because you have to evaluate what you can do, what you can't do, and then construct your offensive plan. How does that happen?
Well, I think we're starting the process. Yesterday we had our first team workout. We can do very little football work with them. We can't do anything. We're evaluating anything with a ball. But we had our first team workout, so you can see how guys move, lateral agility, what kind of explosiveness do they have, how do they follow directions, all those type of things. We'll have another one tomorrow morning. So we've got about another 3 or 4 weeks of that. And then I think the next piece of it is fundamentally making sure we're fundamentally sound. I think you always start with basics, especially when you go into a new situation. You want to be as fundamentally sound as you possibly can be. So we're into that. And then we'll grow schematically as we get into spring ball. And what we'll do is we have an offense. We're still adding. We have one more staff member to add to our offensive side, and we feel like we'll have that done by this weekend at the latest. And so what we'll do is we'll start as a staff coming together, on what have we done well at Troy, what have the other staff members, what have they done, how does that fit our personnel here? And then a lot of it has to do with, I always call the game through 2 people, or through 2 position groups. Number 1, the quarterback. Offensively, we got to do what our quarterback's good at. And number 2, what does our offensive line do the best? And what are they capable of doing? So once we have a better understanding of those 2 positions, then we'll move in on what our offense is going to look like.
I think people have to appreciate how methodical you've been in putting together the staff. You haven't rushed to it. You wanted the right people, and it's working out already. Now, something you talked about at Troy was how critical it was to have energy within the program. Mm-hmm. You wanted the kids looking forward to coming into the building. Now, it reaches a point you talked about where you can hand that off to the kids, and the kids themselves create that energy. But before that happens, it's up to the coaches. That's the responsibility of the coaches to create that. So what do you do out of the chutes to start creating that kind of energy here?
Well, I think environmental factors are so important, and we always talk about environmental factors. The first one we want to create, and I think that's the most important job as a leader of any organization, is to provide an environment where the people under you or the people within the organization can be successful. And I think part of being successful is they got to want to be a part of it, and they got to feel connected. So the first thing we talk about is just fun. We don't have fun. And we're intentional about doing that. I think you've seen on social media, we've had a Super Bowl party. We went bowling. We've done competitions. We're going to have they don't know it yet, but we're going to have, maybe they're watching, so I'm giving it. But, we're having a West Virginia football history quiz in our team meeting this afternoon. So we got to be intentional about having fun. The second thing is we want to have positive energy, and so much of that positive energy is who you surround them with. And our strength staff, who they've been primarily with, has a lot of positive energy. Okay, Mike Joseph and his staff, Brittany Odell in academics, they're extremely positive in that area. So those two, they're spending a lot of time with both of those individuals and their staffs. And then if you look at our makeup of who we've hired so far, a lot of people that like to smile, that have what we call juice, got a little bounce about them. And then we talk about, another environmental factor that's hugely important is we want to create a family atmosphere. And to me, it's about relationships. And to have relationships, you got to invest time. And that's player to player, that's coach to player, coach to coach. So, that's a work in progress. It's not going to just happen overnight.
How much of that, of what your philosophy is, came from watching your mom, your dad, who are in the education business? Is that when it started to click?
Yeah, well, I think that at the end of the day, we're in the education business. Now, thankfully, the education I'm in is a little more fruitful than the education business that my mom and dad were in. But yeah, I grew up where in a teaching environment where my dad was a principal, my mom was an elementary school librarian. I was in the school from as young as I can remember. I was around athletics. Watched my dad. My dad took over a high school, Boyle County High School, that hadn't had a whole lot of success. And we're really struggling as an academic institution as well. And what he did is he invested time and he invested resources and people into extracurricular activities, and band, football, basketball, baseball, whatever it was. And now, if you look at it, 25 years plus removed from when he initially got there, is you've got a school that has a tremendous amount of pride. It's one of the best schools, public institutions in the state of Kentucky, multiple state football championships, been highly successful in the girls and boys sports. And that started with extracurricular activities, primarily athletics. So that was something I watched, and I saw the pride in that. So without a doubt, from how we understand that we're teachers, and I talk to our staff members about this all the time, is we're teachers and we're in a learning environment. And so we need to create an environment where learning is critical and where our guys can be successful. But without a doubt, so much of what we do here and what we do on a day-to-day basis goes back to those educational roots.
And you talk about teaching, let's stick with that theme. When you talk to people who've been in your past, one thing keeps coming up. They talk about his priorities are in the right place. And they mean that across the board. So not only do you live it, but you teach it. I can't get enough of the story about when you beat LSU in Baton Rouge. Where'd your family watch the game? At an Applebee's.
Yeah, well.
Why? Your daughter had a gymnastics meet. That's priority. So talk about not
That's
just
my wife's
living that.
That's my wife's
That's your wife's priority.
Yeah,
okay. Talk about how you teach that.
She's the real star. Now that was she's the one that had the at that time I guess a 1-year-old and keeping up with a 1-year-old at gymnastics. So she's the real star. But yeah, this is a family deal for us. It's not something we just give empty words to. It's something that's really important. And I think it's critical at this age. We get a group of young people that from 17 to 22, 23 at the max, but it's a critical time in their development. And I think, I use this quote all the time, is Warren Buffett has a quote that I use in leadership all the time. I use it with our team, I use it with our staff, is people do what people see. People do what people see, and I believe that with all my heart. And I think it's important, not only for myself, and we make mistakes. Our staff members make mistakes without question. No, trust me, there's no hint of high-level performance in all phases at all times. Guilty, all right? Trust me. But what we do is we try to make a valiant effort, and I think it's really important, not only for myself, but our staff members, is to model what a husband looks like, to model what a father looks like. And the only way you can do that is you have your kids around. You have functions like the Super Bowl where my family wasn't here because they're making the move this weekend. But a lot of our staff members' families were there, and it's important that they see us in a different light.
Yeah. Before we let you go here, jumping back to X's and O's. So spring ball comes up here. What is at the very top of your must-have done list when spring ball and the spring game, which is April the 13th, is over with? What do you have to have before you go off season?
Yeah, well, I think that we got to grow closer as a team, and we need to identify what our strengths and what our weaknesses are. And it's probably just as important, honestly, to identify what we need work on during the spring. Spring's hard to judge because you go against each other the whole time, so you don't really ever have a great feel for what you're best at. All right, or even because your weakness on offense may be mirror up with what your weakness on defense is, so you don't really have a good feel. But I want us to grow chemistry-wise. I think coming out of spring, if we have a fundamental base, I think that's important in all three phases, not just offense and defense, but offense, defense, and special teams. We have a fundamental base where our guys can take that and advance that over the summer. And then we've got our base concepts where they understand at every position what we're trying to do in a big picture, where they can work and grow in that understanding as they work alone over the summer.
You'd be a fun guy to play word association with. And what I mean by that is when you look at the names sprinkled throughout your past,
Yeah.
whether it's Tim Tebow at Florida, I think I know what that word would be, all right? Mark Whipple at UMass, guy that's climbed through the coaching ranks. Tony Franklin. If I say the name Mike Leach, what jumps out to you about Mike Leach?
That you can say on the air.
That you can see on the air. Yeah.
Eccentric. He's one. And the thing I like that him, he's been his own man. You know, he hadn't conformed. He's done it his way, kind of Frank Sinatra. He's done it his way, and his way has been extremely successful for him.
And they said you were the only guy on the team that could hold a conversation with him, and that's how they knew you were going to be a coach.
You have done some research. That's good research. Hey, he was at a young in his career. He wanted to know about horse racing. That's something I did have knowledge of. Actually, I was better at golf and had more horse racing knowledge at 17, 18 than I do right now.
There you go.
Neal, 3 kids will sign today. You'll have a couple in your pocket that you can use. Do you have an idea as to if you will use them, when you will use them? What's your guess?
Yeah, so I think let me say this, is our philosophy at other places and our philosophy here is we're always looking to improve our roster. We're always building our roster. We're not just building our roster in December. In February, we're constantly evaluating and trying to improve our roster at all times. So one of the things and we've done this at every stop, whether it was at Kentucky, at Texas Tech, at Troy as a head coach, is when you get these jobs during transition, I think one of the mistakes that a lot of people make is they try to immediately go out and fill every open recruiting spot they have, and you're speed dating in a lot of ways, for lack of a better word. You're speed dating, and so you make mistakes. You know, there's a lot of mistakes. Maybe it's a character mistake, maybe it's an academic mistake, maybe it's just an athletic ability that mistake where they're not as good a player as you thought. Because recruiting now is an 18-month to 2-year really process, and one thing that's huge for us is live evaluations. Live evaluations. We want to get kids on campus no less than 3 times before they're making a decision. So you don't have that ability to do that in a 3-week relationship. So if you look at the guys that we're going to sign today, for the most part, maybe one exception, are guys that we had relationships with for a long time. You know, where guys that we were on at Troy, but we couldn't close on at Troy because we weren't a Power 5 school, so we changed our logos, and now that relationship that we had at Troy has really paid off, and they're going to sign with us today. But those remaining spots, I think we're going to use a little bit of time. You know, I think that a couple areas of need, just looking at our numbers, are on the offensive line and on the defensive line. We need to at some point probably add an offensive lineman that can come in and help us. We just don't have enough of available bodies right now. And on the defensive line, we just don't, same issue, is we don't have enough bodies, especially guys that can play on the edge. So I think those are 2 of the needs that we'll look to address as we go through the spring into the summer.
Busy day. You've got more to talk about. 3 o'clock. You'll be up at the podium in the team room, and folks can get a little bit more insight. We really appreciate your time.
No, thank you all.
All right. Neal Brown with us. We invite you to stay tuned. We'll continue to break down the class. We've got more highlights of those that have signed with the gold and blue. Do stay with us. Our special signing day show continues here from the Pushkar Center, brought to us by WVU Medicine.